So, February 28th, 2026, this is the day that decades of shadow warfare between Iran, Israel, and the United States just exploded into the open. In this explainer, we're going to break down the whole thing, the US-Israeli strikes on Iran, what actually happened, how in the world we got to this point, and this totally new kind of war that was being fought right alongside the real bombs. Okay, let's get into it.
Wow, talk about not being subtle. This message comes out just hours after the first missiles hit. President Trump basically lays it all out on the table. He's saying, hey, this isn't just about blowing up military sites. No, this was a direct public call for the Iranian people to overthrow their own government. That one statement, it set the stakes absolutely sky high and really framed the entire conflict from the get-go.
So, imagine this, February 28th, 2026. All of a sudden, reports start flooding in. Massive explosions rocking Iran's biggest cities. We're talking Tehran, the capital, Isfahan, the historic heart of the country, even the holy city of Qom. Right away, it was clear this wasn't some small surgical strike. Nope. This was a massive, coordinated attack aimed right at the heart of Iran's military and government.
Okay, so who are the main players on this chessboard? On one side, you've got the US and Israel, led by President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. They had all these intense code names for their operations. Israel called theirs Roaring Lion, while the US had Epic Fury and Shield of Judah. And on the other side, Iran, under Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Their counter-operation was called True Promise 3. So the big question is, did this attack just come out of nowhere, or was it, the final explosive chapter of a story that's been written for decades? A shadow war fought with proxies, with sanctions, with secret ops. To really get what happened in 2026, we've got to rewind the tape and look at the deep, messy history that got us here. All right, that brings us to our first deep dive, the decades-long shadow war. We're going to unpack the key elements that kept this fire burning for so long, a powerful military force, two totally opposite strategies for dealing with Iran's nuclear program, and a huge web of proxy fighters spread all over the Middle East. Okay, you can't talk about Iran's power in the region without talking about the Quds Force. Think of them as the elite, international arm of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Their whole job, their entire reason for being, is to push Iranian influence outside its borders. And how do they do that? By arming, training, and bankrolling militant groups all across the Middle East. They're basically Iran's #1 foreign policy tool, which, of course, puts a giant target on their back. Now, when it came to Iran's nuclear program, the world was basically split down the middle on how to handle it. For years, there were these two competing strategies. On the one hand, you had the 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA. That was all about diplomacy. Iran scales back its nuclear program big time, and in return, it gets billions in sanctions relief. But then, everything flipped. In 2018, the US walks away from that deal and starts this maximum pressure campaign. The idea was to hit Iran with crippling sanctions to force them into a new, tougher deal. And what was the result? Well, tensions went through the roof, and Iran just went right back to doing the exact nuclear stuff the first deal had stopped. And this is what that Quds Force we were just talking about actually looks like on a map. This is Iran's so-called axis of resistance. We're talking about a massive network, somewhere between 140,000 and 185,000 fighters, all part of these proxy groups. You've got Hezbollah and Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, militias in Syria and Iraq, Hamas in Gaza, the list goes on. This entire network gets more than $1 billion a year from Iran, and it's how they project power way, way beyond their own borders. Okay, so now that we have all that backstory, let's zoom in on the final moments. What were the sparks that lit the fuse? This next section, we're calling it the final countdown. It's all about the crazy, chaotic chain of events that happened right before the bombs started falling. The final slide into all-out war happened incredibly fast. It really kicks off in late 2025. You've got these huge anti-government protests breaking out all over Iran, the biggest the country had seen since 1979. As the government cracks down hard, the US starts moving a massive amount of military hardware into the region, what some called an armada. Then, early February, a second US aircraft carrier shows up. And then comes the ultimatum. On February 19th, President Trump draws a line in the sand. You have 10 days to make a deal or else. Well, 9 days later, the strikes began. And this chart, it's a perfect snapshot of the information war that was already raging before the shooting war even started. That violent crackdown on the protesters became a huge justification for everything that came next. But look at the numbers. How many people actually died? The Iranian government said a little over 3,000. Human rights groups said, no, it's more like 7,000. And then President Trump claimed it was a staggering 32,000. I mean, you've got three totally different numbers, each one fueling a completely different story. And that whole battle for the narrative, for the truth, leads us perfectly into our next section, the war for perception. Because you have to understand, in a modern conflict like this, the fight over what people believe is happening, that's fought with information, with disinformation, is every bit as important as the actual fighting on the ground. Yeah, there's actually a name for this. It's called fifth-generation warfare. And the basic idea is that the battlefield isn't just land, sea, and air anymore. The real battlefield is virtual. It's the information space. The goal is to grab control of the story, to manipulate public opinion on both sides, and to literally shape how people perceive reality. And the weapons in this new kind of war are unbelievably powerful. I love this quote from Bassem Twisi. He calls algorithms information nuclear weapons. And just think about that for a second. It's so true, right? They can amplify a single piece of misinformation and make it go viral globally in minutes. They reinforce our own biases, feeding us more of what we already believe. It just makes it almost impossible to figure out what's real and what's not. So what does this disinformation actually look like in practice? Well, it usually comes in three flavors. The most basic are what we call shallow fakes. You take a real picture, a real video, but you attach it to a totally fake story. Then you've got content manipulation. This is a little trickier. You take real stuff, but you alter it. You crop it, you edit it to make it more emotional. And then there's the really scary stuff, deep fakes. This is AI-generated video and audio that is so realistic, it's pretty much impossible for the human eye to spot as a fake. You know, this war for perception goes so deep, it's even baked into the names of the military operations. Take Israel's Operation Rising Lion. That's a direct quote from the Torah about a triumphant nation that devours its prey. It's designed to sound powerful, to inspire courage. And Iran, they called their operation True Promise, which comes from the Quran. It's about God's promise of victory. The supreme leader even compared it to the staff of Moses to feeding his enemies. See, both sides are tapping into these incredibly deep religious and cultural symbols to sell the war to their own people. And that brings us to our last section here, the region on fire. Because once those first strikes landed, the situation just spiraled out of control almost immediately, sending shockwaves of chaos across the entire Middle East.
The fallout wasn't gradual, it was instant. Israel declares a nationwide state of emergency, knowing retaliation is coming, and it does, fast. Iran launches missiles at U.S. bases in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, the UAE, 4 different countries. Civilian planes are grounded over Israel and Iraq, and inside Iran itself, the lights go out, digitally speaking. Internet access plummets to just 4% of normal, and phone lines in Tehran go down. The entire region was just plunged into chaos.
So, when you take a step back, the really big takeaway is this. We are watching a new kind of war unfold, a war fought on 2 fronts at the exact same time, on the physical battlefield with bombs and missiles, and on the virtual battlefield with bytes and disinformation. And that leaves us with a really tough question, not just for this conflict, but for the future. In a world where wars are fought with bytes just as much as bombs, how can any of us ever